should be in a bad mood, but it feels kind of nice to be inside, doesn't it? Like, I want to go up to JFK and sit in front of the fireplace and drink something with pumpkin in it or something. That's the kind of mood I'm in today. So if you guys say, hey, later on we should go drink some pumpkin beverages in front of the fireplace, I will gladly join you. Guys, just a reminder, if you have not yet submitted your Mentorship Day submission, please do so. That's 10 easy points. And I was shocked that a couple of people actually chose to write papers rather than go to Mentorship Day. Blows my mind. That being said, guys, your next assignment isn't due till November 11th. So we got some time here. I'm giving you two options, guys. I'm giving you an option to either read an article that I have posted and to answer some questions about why the United Auto Workers failed to organize at a Volkswagen plant, or I'm giving you an option to talk about social media and unions. Exercise B, a friend you work with has posted a social media announcement about a gathering to hear from a union official about organizing in your workplace. Will you respond like the post or not, and why? So we're talking about the idea of free speech, for example, on social media involving unions. Any questions, guys? I know, Elliot, you're saying these are two compelling assignments.
This is due on Monday.
What's due on Monday?
That's November 11th of Monday.
Oh, you raise an interesting point. I think to go back to the terms of our collective bargaining agreement, I'm in violation of those terms. Am I not? That means, see, Corey, aren't you glad you came?
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, Elliot, we need to collectively come up with a solution as our de facto foreman for the union here. Would an acceptable solution be to move that back to the 13th? Because that is no longer due on a Monday, and gives you 2 more days to write it. All right. Does the union ratify that decision? All right. The union has won. So it's due on the 13th. Thank you for keeping me honest in the terms of the collective bargaining agreement. If I saw a hand up over here, yes.
I guess this is really off topic. When it comes to like liking and unliking a post, I know a lot of people, like on Facebook or Instagram, will like something, but not necessarily, want for it. In the case of a union gathering, what would you say to that?
Well, that's exactly what I'm asking you to give me your opinion on. So let's say, for example, Kenny, you're the organizer. You're the guy who's saying, hey, we're going to do a gathering over at my place. We're all your buddies from work. Is there a risk in me hitting the like button on your post?
Yes and no.
Help Kenny out here. What might be the risk in me liking that? Avery, what's the risk in me hitting that like button?
It shows that you have an interest in it.
Yeah, and could my employer also be watching Kenny's Facebook page? Yeah, he absolutely could. So could I be putting myself at risk with my employer? Not officially, because officially that's not something that the employer should be concerned about. Unofficially, could that employer say, yeah, that guy's a union sympathizer. Keep an eye on the talking. That's probably why Jim Loeb was here. He heard I was up to something in this room. He was probably here to check on me. Wow, I missed it. Not good. Other questions about the assignment, guys, because you have options here. I love you to have options and choices. We should all have lots of options. And speaking of options, guys, it's really funny how GM just wrapped up with the United Auto Workers, and Ford announced that they already have a deal. So, guys, I'm going to play a brief news clip for you, and we're going to talk about why Ford was lucky to follow GM.
Do you think this makes it feel? Do you think it makes it feel better because Ford kind of reached similar terms? Or do you think it makes it feel bad because we kind of broke first and now we're setting the pace for everybody?
I think you're asking an excellent question. And it comes down to the idea, for example, GM, when these companies have their negotiations, they typically agree to go in order. So in other words, it was GM's turn to go first because all of the big three are covered by the United Auto Workers. If I were GM, here's how I'd be feeling right now. I just lost billions of dollars in a strike for over a month's worth of inactivity. And Ford just walked right in, learned from their deal, and they're not losing any money on the deal. If I'm Ford right now, I'm going to be doing one of these. Like, wow, we dodged a bullet there. So sad, too bad, GM, but it's really good for us. What do you guys think? Yes.
I think it makes Ford look good because it seems like, even though this might not be how it did play out, it seems like they were kind of more willing to work union.
Yeah.
Even though maybe they weren't. But because like they didn't go on strike, and it seemed like things were just resolved like behind the scenes, then it makes them as a company look a lot better.
Yeah, I think that the United Auto Workers, whether intentionally or unintentionally, probably have a more conciliatory or nice kind of approach with Ford management, simply because Ford sat on the sidelines. They were doing background work while GM is going through this really tense negotiation with the United Auto Workers, and they get a chance to come across as a lot more reasonable. Other thoughts, guys? Yes?
You left it yet. Ford's deadline with the United Auto Workers in terms of the contract. I'm curious to play out a hypothetical. The strike's still going on and seeing how it would progress. Where if Ford would budge first to see how long they would also pull out. Still waiting for GM.
That's a good question. I think typically speaking, the way the United Auto Workers, and don't quote me on this, but the United Auto Workers typically don't go into formal negotiations with another auto manufacturer until they're finished with the first one. So in some ways, there was no way that wasn't going to be an example. You know what I mean? That's the typical way of doing things. Yes?
How long do you think it's going to take for Fiat Chrysler to strike a deal as well?
I don't think it'll take them long at all. They'll look at what Ford and GM decided on, and I can't see them doing much, if anything, different. And by the way, you guys, I don't know if you've been hearing the news, Fiat Chrysler now might actually be getting merged with another automaker. I forget who it is. It's another, I think, Italian company, and I can't for the life of me think what the name of the car company is. But they're getting bought by another company too. So, guys, here's the analogy I would make. Since Elliot was our shrewd negotiator today, he did a nice job with that. Let's say, for example, Elliot and I both work for Dr. Fry. And it's that time of the year where we do our performance evaluations. And Elliot and I are talking, and when Elliot says, I think I'm going to go for a $10,000 raise. And I'm saying to Elliot, that's a great idea. I think you should do that. And Elliot goes in first, and when he walks out of the office, he looks like somebody has drug him behind a truck. He's got a black eye, he's missing a couple of teeth, and he's limping. I don't think I'm going to be asking for the $10,000 raise. On the same token, if Elliot comes out and he's got his hands on his lapels and he's wearing a new gold ring, I might be saying, well, maybe I'm going to ask for $12,000 instead of $10,000. So the first person to go in to negotiate sets the tone and the example. Nobody beat up Elliot, though. He's a good negotiator. He'd walk out of there with a good pay raise. Any other comments or questions before we move on, guys? All right, guys, we're going to be moving, again, at a pretty good clip today. I left off, we were talking about, for example, you have to have what we refer to as appropriate bargaining units. So when we're trying to unionize in our company, we want to make sure, number one, that the union is appropriate to our industry, and that the right people within a company are unionized with the right people. For example, of all the folks that are listed up here, we got registered nurses, physicians, technical employees, skilled maintenance employees, guards. Is there any one of these designations that is required to have its own bargaining union if it is unionized? Which one has to be separate from everybody else? Guards. Anytime you're talking about people who occupy any kind of an authority position, whether they're a police department, for example, if you work for UPMC Altoona, that's actually a police department. Or if you have a security department, for example, if they unionize, there's nothing to prohibit them from doing so. But they've got to have their own bargaining. And it's very difficult to, health industry is used as an example because the specialties are so different. Somebody who works in radiology, for example, has a way different job than somebody who maybe works in wound care. That would be an example. So when we are getting ready to vote in an election, there's other things we have to consider. Number one, are you actually working in a department that could be considered part of a bargaining unit? So for example, if the carpenters are unionizing in our shop, and they're a specialized trade, the janitor is probably not eligible to be a part of that group. Were you employed for, the working figure on this is about a year. If you haven't been employed for a year, for example, it can be very difficult to justify you participating in an election. So are you employed also when the election took place? If you got fired before the election, you can't vote in the election, for example. Now, if you guys are on strike, if you're actually on strike when you're ratifying a new union, for example, because you can switch between unions while you're on strike, as messy as that is, if you've been on strike for more than 12 months, you can't vote in an election either. Because at that point, if you got a strike that's going on for more than 12 months, That is a bigger labor issue and something that's probably concerning the National Labor Relations Board. There's one other designation we talked about the other day that makes you ineligible to vote in a union election. What might it be? Yes? Exactly right. If you are related related to somebody who owns or manages the business, for example, you may not be eligible to vote. And here's the trick. People sometimes have to disclose that stuff. For example, people can be close relatives and have different last names. A lot of husbands and wives, for example, do not have the same last name. See, that's something you got to disclose. In terms of other things, for example, you have what we refer to as an untimely petition. And that means if you have an election in the last year, you can't have another election before that year is up. If people are already in a union and covered under a collective bargaining agreement, for example, you notice the United Auto Workers, when they set an agreement, they go for multiple year agreements. So if you're in a multiple year agreement, you're covered. Let's say, for example, I'm in the teachers union and my contract goes for the next 5 years. I'm 3 years in. I can't vote for another union while I'm already in a collective bargaining union. I'm already in a union. The exception is if you are voting to decertify your own union. That's the exception. You can definitely do that. And again, what we refer to here says the contract bar doctrine. A valid multi-year contract protects the union by barring representation elections for up to 3 years. Here's what that means. The United Auto Workers, for example, just got a contract with GM, and they're going to have one before. If a competing union wants to come in there, they cannot come in during somebody else's established collective bargaining agreement, and that's a 3-year window. So you've got to be, if you're 3 years in or beyond that, another union could come in and try to solicit membership. You could choose between those unions, but generally speaking, and this is a general statement, if you've got an existing collective bargaining agreement and people are happy with their union, they're not petitioning to get rid of it, you cannot come in as another union and have an election to try to get rid of somebody else's union. And then we also refer to something called the Excelsior Rule. What this means, guys, is that basically under the ways that current things work, let me roll back and tell you some context for this. In 2015, who was president of the United States? Obama. What was his stance on unions? He was very pro-union. He was very pro-labor. And the Excelsior Rule that got backed up with some other legislation during that period of time basically says if you're an employer and people want to have an election, within 7 days, within a week of that election, you as the employer must provide a list of names of people who are eligible to vote in that election. So remember that. That's the Excelsior Rule. So I'll ask you guys. Guys, what do you think could affect whether or not an election is successful for you? What could factor in that? Not burning yourself with coffee. That's the first part. Oh, man, I got it over with my tie and everything else. What a bummer. So, guys, what could affect the outcome of a election? Yes?
Benefits of the job.
Yeah, so is it something that's actually needed? Number one, are people positive about it? What else? Yes?
Current compensation.
Yeah, for example, if people are being paid well right now, and the thing is ironic, actually, if people are currently being well compensated, that can also help too, because people want to preserve that, for example. What else could affect the positive outcome for a union? Yes?
Pressure from the employer.
Tell me more about that.
Like, if, like in the video we were watching, they said that they have to like shut down if they're unionized, or they brought in the anti-union speakers, that kind of thing. So if people feel that their employment's threatened, if they do unionize, they might not vote to.
Yeah, those threats can go either way. Either you're saying, you know, hey, you're threatening me, you know, you put up the finger that goes between these two fingers, that's what we're going to do to you. Or the opposite reaction, holy crap, if we vote for this union and we're all going to lose our jobs. So it can go either way. Emily, you had your hand up too.
Well, mine's kind of like this. I was just going to say fear. The use of fear.
Yeah, it's a powerful weapon. And is it legal, by the way? Is it legal for an employer to say to employees, if you vote for a union, you're going to lose your jobs? You can't say that stuff. And yet we have the company, an American company, this Chinese firm, who's saying, yeah, absolutely, you're going to lose your jobs if you vote for a union. So some of the things that help us, if you get high voter turnout, that's good, generally speaking, for union elections. People are more likely to show up to vote if they are for something than if they are against something, which would explain some of the recent elections in this country where we've had such crappy turnout because nobody was really excited about the candidates. Here's the deal, too. There's kind of a sweet spot in terms of from the time you get the union organizing going until the election. We're talking like 30 to 45 days. If it's shorter than that, you don't have time to promote it. If it's longer than that, people start losing their enthusiasm. If you also are going for a smaller unit, for example, in the St. Francis community, our carpentry unit's a relatively small part of the organization where everybody knows everybody else. How could that play in a union election's favor? So we've got everybody who has a close relationship and knows everybody else. How could that help in terms of voting in a union? I'll put it this way. When I walk into Torby, for example, I can walk around Torb and I can find who sits where based on what sports teams typically occupy which tables. Am I wrong? I know exactly where the football players sit. I know where the soccer players sit. I know where the international people hang out. So they've got very tight relationships and they talk. People who work in a specific part of a company do the same thing at lunch. They're going to be talking about it among themselves. And chances are, if you got a smaller bargaining unit, you're not going to have to guess what everybody's thinking about the union. They're going to all come together or they're going to be against it. But generally speaking, a smaller unit, for example, has a bigger effect. So we also have, the union who is trying to get into this employer. Are they positively throwing resources? Are they throwing internationals? Are they getting people excited about it? And this is one I want you to remember. Take a note on this one, guys. Typically speaking, and this is kind of ironic, because when you think about the AFL-CIO is the largest union of unions in the United States. Independent unions in recent history are having better success rates than AFL-affiliated unions. Why might that be? Why might people have a negative opinion of the AFL-CIO? Jason?
It's so large that it almost feels like its own kind of bureaucracy in itself, and it has those negative connotations of corruption and just kind of being this big, non-personal business.
Yeah, I love that answer, by the way. That's I'd say you just nailed about 80% of it. And there are some folks who just absolutely, when they hear AFL-CIO, still have the stereotype, those guys are a bunch of commies. We're not voting them into our place, even if people really want the labor. So I think those are connotations that a lot of these companies, these unions, are still fighting to go against. So it's interesting how this stuff works out. So guys, I'm not going to read this whole thing to you other than point out a couple of things. Since 2015, one of the last things that the Obama administration did while they were in office were establishing some new election procedures for unions. In the old days, guys, literally, the old days being prior to 2015, you couldn't have any kind of electronic filing to have an election. It's 2015 and we're still doing this stuff on paper. It's like the registrar's office. It's amazing. But wait a minute, that's 2019. That's still happening. So we can actually do that stuff these days. This is some of the bigger things to know, though, guys. Prior to 2015, this is the biggest takeaway from this particular slide. Prior to 2015, employers were not required to provide a list of prospective voters. They were not required to provide that list until the regional director approved the election. What that means, that the NLRB had to specifically request and approve the election before the employer had to provide the list of names. Under the current rules, if you are a union and you're filing for an election, if you want to solicit for an election, as soon as that happens, upon request, the NLRB has to get a list of names from the employer. So the old rule was, until the election was scheduled, you didn't have to send the list of names. Now, as soon as you're asking for it, they have to send the list of names. Why is that an important distinction? I didn't say that well, but why is that an important distinction? If we're waiting till we schedule the election to get that list of names versus we're sending out that list of names prior to the election. Yes, what's the difference?
Who's the names? What do you mean by list of names?
The names are anybody within the company who could be eligible to vote for the union. So under the old rules, to draw the distinction, under the old rules, you already had to have an election scheduled before the employer was required to provide that information to the National Labor Relations Board. under the new rules, as soon as the folks who are trying to organize say that they are interested in having an election, the employer has to provide that information to the NLRB. What's the difference? Why is that important? Yes?
Well, in the past, you knew that there was going to be an election. Now you don't know if you're actually going to get an election, even though your names are already sent out.
That's part of it.
I was going to say, so does the employer collect that information so they have the names of people that can vote?
Yes.
So in the new rules, that means that they can target those employees with like anti-union speeches or that kind of thing.
So they have the information of who's actually eligible to make that vote.
Well, and to be clear, employers have always had that information. I'm not explaining the concept well. Yes.
I think the benefit of it is that, well, for the union at least, they get a list of everyone that could potentially vote for the union, and that kind of gives them a gauge of how much support they could potentially rally.
That's exactly right. And Jason, you explained it better than I did because I got tongue-tied, probably because I ruined my favorite tie today. I'm still suffering a loss. The morning is the loss of this tie. But what this really basically means, if you're providing that list of eligible voters to the NLRB, who else beside the employer now has access to it? It begins with a U. You got it. And so that makes it easier for the union to hopefully solicit votes, target people, and get them out for the election. Does that all make sense? Sometimes, guys, on a Friday, whenever you are talking, the words in your head don't come out of your mouth. It happens all the time. Wait till you get married. When you get married, then all of a sudden, the thing that comes out of your brain, you're saying, this couldn't possibly be misunderstood or misconstrued. Brain, we're good with that. Go ahead to the mouth. And the mouth is like, yeah, let's just put that right out there. And it comes out, and you've got this big dumb grin thinking, there's no way this could be misconstrued. Meanwhile, your spouse on the other side of the room is like, I can't believe that word just came out of that guy's mouth. And it immediately goes from the ears, quick to the brain, quick to the scalp, and quick to ruining Friday night. It's amazing. It's like the speed of light. That travels back, and the other person over here is like all of a sudden realizing that what came out of their mouth was not the same thing that was in their brain. And it goes something like this. The scientific term for it, I think, is the oh shit principle. And it's, wow, what I meant isn't what I said, and there's no pulling it back now. And then you get into code, and it gets awful. It makes union negotiations seem really easy. So if you ever want to think that your job as a union arbitrator is easy, get married. That's the tough stuff. But we should continue. Guys, in terms of elections, and we get into what we refer to as secret ballot elections. And we talked a little bit, for example, why, for example, secret ballots have a lot of people who back them up. We're going to be talking about some of the legislation that's been proposed to eliminate secret ballot elections. But I want your opinion on this, guys. If you all were voting for a union or against a union in this room, would you prefer an open or secret election? Which would you prefer and why? Yes? Yeah, tell me why.
Just so that you know what's going to be, like, when know that I was for it.
That's. I think your point about the employer is valid too. Keep going.
Like, somebody, like, your peers could, like, affect the way you vote. Like, if they know you're going to, I don't know, vote. If they know who you're going to vote for, they might, like, think differently about you or something.
I think you're absolutely right. Yes.
Like I was reading something when you mentioned it on the Volkswagen plant here, and so one of the biggest things kind of lingering after the vote, because it was pretty close, but they still voted against to unionize. But one of the biggest things afterwards was a split of employees, and if you don't have secret ballots, that would be even easier to target people, not necessarily by the employer, but even like employee versus employee. So you might have a stronger separation of workers within the same company.
If you guys had to guess, who's been pushing for open vote elections, non-secret ballots? Who are the biggest proponents of those? I'm sorry? So we have a guess from employers. Do we have any other? Who agrees with Corey on this one? I think it's a good guess, but believe it or not, it's actually the unions. A lot of unions are feeling they can peer pressure people into voting. Employers actually are proponents of secret ballot elections. Their general consensus is that although people may on the surface say, for example, I am for the union, when it comes to that voting box, they're actually going to basically say I'm against it. We saw something very similar to that, guys. When I say this is not an endorsement or an indictment of your candidate. But in the last election, Hillary Clinton was predicted to win by a landslide. And Donald Trump, even if it wasn't a popular vote victory, based on the way the map turned out, he won a lot of places he wasn't predicted to win. And what the prevailing wisdom is, a lot of people did not want to tell their friends they were voting for Donald Trump. And he ended up winning. And we see the same thing happen in union elections. But let's get through a couple more slides here before we do our first opportunity for a question today. All right. You basically have several choices when you go to a secret ballot. You could be actually voting between two unions. So you're going to have 2 or 3 choices. You're either going to have union or non-union, or you're going to have union A, union B, and non-union. You can even have multiple unions. I don't know of too many elections in this day and age where you see multiple unions competing, but it can happen. Here's the trick. It has to be held at the workplace, and it has to be during working hours. So you cannot require people to come in on time off to vote for the union. That's considered an unfair labor practice. In terms of the ways that outcomes come for this sort of stuff, a simple majority decision means everybody who votes decides. So if you get 50% plus 1, you've got an election. If it's too close to call, if you're counting the votes, for example, and it's inconclusive for whatever reason, maybe some of the ballots were unreadable, that could be one scenario. You might have to hold a runoff election. Or if you're picking between 2 unions, for example. At that point, if the union wins, you got the National Labor Relations Board who's saying basically, here we are. You officially have a union. After the election is done, the employer or the union, or the employees rather, can challenge it for up to a week. They can demand a recount. They can demand to have an investigation if there were unfair labor practices, etc. Here's some examples of what these ballots look like. And it's really that simple. Do you want a union or not? Yes or no? And then we have the other one. Do you want a union, or do you want a union, or do you want neither? So neither is right in the middle. So again, a lot of places still use paper ballots at this point. It's still the way that they are counted, and the NLRB will be on site to count them, for example. After you get your election done, you've got 30 to 45 days to get it together. Actually, you have 30 days to get it together, and you've got to get an initial labor agreement. About 25 to 30% of the time, people fail to get it together. They fail to get a negotiating unit up and operating. A lot of the people who are very enthusiastic for the union, when it comes right down to it, sometimes don't want to do the work. Some of the things that help you get that first contract, for example, ironically, if you already have good wages in a facility, you're more likely to have people get a contract. They want to preserve them. And there's another thing that's at play there. If a company's already used to paying high wages and they're giving a little bit of a bump, it's not that big a deal. If we've got a low-wage unit, for example, somebody who is working at McDonald's for $7.50, for example, and they want to go up to $15 an hour with the union, that's a big jump. It's a bigger jump than somebody getting a $1 or $2 raise or a 2 or 3% raise, for example. Anytime you have a landslide victory and anytime you have the union actively participating too, those things also help get that first bargaining agreement. We're going to pause for our first opportunity for a question or a comment. What would you like to say? Kenny Brumbaugh.
I was reading earlier this morning one of the directors of Joker, and he said that there will be a Joker 2. I guess it's a 2-part question. 1, what do you think it will be about? And 2, what would you want it to be about?
Oh my goodness! Wow, what I think it'll be about. How many of you have seen the film so far? Okay, for those of you, no spoilers here, but we see him become the Joker in the first film. To me, it would be watching that guy who has just realized his power in the first film really become the supervillain he's destined to be, in terms of really watching him go from this misunderstood schizophrenic to somebody who is absolutely wielding power in a very chaotic way. I would like to see that. What I'd really like to see, if I were able to have any storyline I wanted, I'd love to see a live action interpretation of The Killing Joke. but they really have to change it around because of the way they did his origin. It's different from the Killing Joke comic. That would be good. There was actually a story called The Joker's Five-Way Revenge, which was from the early 1970s. And there's one, I think the death in the family storyline also could be very good. If everybody's not familiar with all these comics I'm talking about, Death in the Family in the 1980s is when the first or the second Robin died. And I think that would be pretty interesting too. So I don't know. That means we have to have a Robin, and I'm not crazy about Robin actually. I like a solo Batman better, but I want to see Batman in the next film. Go for it.
Could you see him battling? Could you see some dude in a cage with bat ears as you put it battling that Joker?
I don't know. I mean, that's going to be a challenge. I don't know how you do it and make it real. You know, I don't know how you make it that gritty and real. I think this Batman is definitely not going to be a nice person. And I think it's going to be somebody who maybe is a little mentally unhinged himself. It's going to be two sides of the same card. And my prediction, I think that Thomas Wayne is actually Joker's father. I think he is. Yes. Oh, thank you. White vinegar. Yeah, I will try that when I get home today. Even though it's silk, that's okay? Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I love this stuff. I don't want to. Awesome. Well, thank you. Yes.
What was your dog for Halloween?
My dog, we didn't put the costume on him yesterday. We will on Saturday when the trick-or-treaters come around. We have a little Monsters Inc. costume for him. He's Mike Wazanski. And he's freaking adorable. But anyway, that's it. That's my Achilles heel. Get me talking about my dog, and we're done for the day. Guys, in terms of once the secret ballot is done and we have the election done, at this point, if you're the union, you are what we refer to as the exclusive bargaining agent. That means you're representing all these folks. Your responsibility is to represent the people who elected you, just like a politician. And you also got to bargain in good faith with the employer. And at this point, if you're the employee, or employer rather, you also have to say, hey, we're going to operate in good faith. And guess what, guys? If you guys just joined the union, and I'm management, can I come over and say, hey, Emily, you did a really great job. I'd like to give you a $2 an hour raise. Can I do that? No, she can't talk to me about it anymore. She's represented by the union. So that's the difference once you're in. People have their own opinions on what they like or don't like about that, but the bottom line is once you have elected your union, and if you're in a non-right-to-work state, that union is now your contract and it's determining most things about your conditions of employment. Yes, ma'am?
So the union's all about groups. They can't do that for like personal, like a single individual.
Tell me more. Let me get some context to your question.
So I was asking, so unions represent groups as a whole.
They do.
If only one person wants to get benefit, they step to the union, and they can only do it for that one person still, not the whole group.
That's right. And what they typically a union won't do something specifically for one person either. Let me give you an example. Let's say you guys are all members of the union. Elliot, you've worked here for 12 years. Todd, you've worked here for 15 years. Emily, you've worked here for 20. He's probably making more money. Yeah, Emily's making more money. Now, let's say, for example, I want to do merit pay. Are you guys familiar with the term merit pay? It means, for example, somebody's doing a good job, so you give them a pay increase. And I see, for example, Elliot, even though he's the new guy, he's doing a really good job, I want to give him a raise. It's going to be very difficult for me through a union contract to give him a specific raise because most raises are based on things like annual increases, cost of living adjustments, and seniority. Now, there are some provisions for things like performance pay in some union contracts, but they're not generally a substantial part of your pay scale. Yes?
That's the thing that tipped me off when I worked for ACTA was that they have the list of people with years of experience in seniority list. And you'd see people on there with like 30, 40 years. And I'm thinking, how in the world would someone who's been here for 2 years want to be here their whole life to get to that level? Especially when you also see that some of those people that are up there, you see how their work ethic is at that age, and you're just like, what the heck?
Well, when I say this, guys, keep in mind, I try to have a balanced perspective. I hope in these conversations that I'm not coming across as for or against unions. My goal is to get you guys to think about it. I want to be neutral on this stuff. But generally speaking, here's the ultimate negative stereotype of a union employee is I've been here for 40 years. I'm at the top of the pay scale. You can't fire me because I'm collectively bargained. I'm protected by a collective bargaining agreement. Therefore, I'm going to show up and do what I have to get the job done. And it's usually I work 8 hours for 8 hours pay. And that's the ultimate stereotype. I'm not saying all people in unions are like that. Yes?
So like, what if he was like a PA, he didn't want to be in the union, but still pay the dues and stuff?
He's still covered by the collective bargaining agreement. And so the way it works, because we're a non-right to work state, he is required as a member of the union to pay dues. He can choose to not be active. He can say I'm not in the union. He can say that, but he still has to pay the same dues. He still has to abide by the same contract, and he's still bound under the same pay scale. Now, remember, in the Beck objection rights, Elliot, if he objects to union lobbying, can say to his union rep, "You can use my money for grievances and for collective bargaining, and nothing more." And they have to abide by that, and they have to give him an accounting of how his money is being spent. Yes.
Isn't it a way to get a better pay raise? I know the one thing I noticed is that they had like a scale system per job. So like you had jobs that were like a rated 8 on the pay scale, so that's like your highest paid job. And then you had like a landscaper that was like at 1, and that was like the lowest of it, but still abide to that bare minimum contract. Is that a way that people try to get more money, is by filing to get the higher?
Let me give you guys an example. I know nobody here is probably an expert in the steel industry, but when the steel industry was a big deal in Pittsburgh, some professions were riskier than others. If you were operating the furnaces, and these were building-sized furnaces dealing with liquid metal, accidents happened and people died on a regular basis for these. Bet your butt, if you took one of those jobs, you were getting a higher scale. It wasn't always based on seniority. It was based on you took a job in that department. The other thing, too, and we'll get into this more as we get further into the class. I don't think we're going to finish the chapter today, but that's okay because I'd rather have these kind of conversations. You have to do what they refer to as bid a job. And here's how that works, guys. Let's say, for example, there's a great high-paying job working here at St. Francis in one of our higher stress departments, working, for example, in risk management. And we all have a union shop. It means that we're going to put the job listing up, and you can bid on the job. One of the things that's factored in is seniority. That makes sense, guys? It gets into some sticking points on all this stuff. You're asking great questions today, guys. All right. In terms of other things, guys, we refer to something called the Employee Free Choice Act, and this is what the Obama administration was really pushing for. What the Obama administration was basically saying that we could have, if most people filed authorization cards, you signed a card that said you're authorizing a union, that they could certify a union without an election, even if there were no unfair labor practices. You guys remember, in our 3 scenarios, we had the too cold, the too hot, and just right. In the too hot scenario, for example, if there have been such egregious unfair labor practices, the National Labor Relations Board can ratify a union without an election. That is true. But what the Obama administration has been pushing for, and a few administrations before that, is something referred to as the Free Choice Act, meaning that people would be able to simply file authorization cards, and if most people were filing authorization cards, if the majority had filed an authorization card that said, I want to be in the union, that they could go ahead and authorize the union. Yes? It definitely is. The difference is, let's say, for example, all of us say we signed our union cards that we want to have an election. It still comes down to a private vote. For example, I want to put this in a context that's very honest without sounding insulting. Okay. Has anybody ever been in a situation where somebody did something wrong and you had to report it? Have you ever been in that situation? Somebody did something wrong, you had to report it. And have you ever had a confrontation where somebody who was reported comes to you later and say, did you report me? I've been in a situation and I've had to lie. No, I didn't. I didn't report you. And so at that point, I did the right thing, knowing I had some level of anonymity. And what the point is with the idea of mandatory secret ballots, even if I'm signing a union card and saying, yeah, I'm in for this, not really, because when we vote, I'm not going to be a part of this. The folks who are against the Free Choice Act are saying that people are not necessarily going to say their true feelings when they got to put their name to it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because I kind of apologize a little today because we're getting a little off topic, but I want to make sure these points are hitting with you here. The point to take away from this slide, the Employee Free Choice Act is not law. It is something that people have been pushing for who are pro-union because they believe, for example, that union authorization cards should be the be-all, end-all on this. So most of the people who are proponents, for example, typically end up being unions. People who are opponents tend to be people who are either anti-union or they are employers. They still want the secret ballot because most people in those situations feel that people vote with their conscience when nobody is keeping them accountable. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. In terms of if you lose the election, actually, you know what? We're going to end it right there. We only have a couple of slides to get through, but we're going to end it there. And we pick up on Monday, guys. We're going to finish this chapter, and we're going to start chapter 6 as well. So I'll open that up for you prior to that time. Guys, by show of hands, how many of you are traveling for competition? All right, good luck, guys, and thanks for being here. Have a wonderful weekend.